I'm Christy Melhart Slay. I am the Director of Technical Alignment for the Sustainability Consortium, and my background's in conservation biology. So I have my PhD from the Biological Sciences Department at the University of Arkansas. So when I was a graduate student in the biology department, I was teaching a lot of biology classes, and I was getting interested in sustainability and the intersection of science and business. And I reached out to Dr. John Johnson, who I knew from the Ozark National Science Center, and asked him about what was then the Applied Sustainability Center and opportunities to work there. And he took me on as a graduate student to really help in the early phases of building the consortium. And I just loved it. I loved the aspect of taking the science that I know and being able to translate that for businesses. And I just am able to see real world impacts. So resiliency planning and sustainability are very related. Both of them take long-term, very strategic thinking. And for resiliency, oftentimes a company might think, how do I have a resilient supply chain? And how do I make sure that that in times of crises, I have supply? But sustainability goes hand in hand with that. And so the more you understand your supply chain to become resilient, the more you know about your suppliers, the more you know how they're procuring the supply that you're dependent on, the more you know about how it's made and where it comes from. And when you have all of that information, it is really goes hand in hand with the type of information you need to make sustainable purchases. So to understand the environmental and the social impacts of how those supply chains are made. But it's more, again, about just supply and demand when it comes to sustainability. It's about having those relationships in place, having those strategies in place, but also being able to incorporate what are the environmental impacts, what are the social impacts, how do I make better decisions, how do I encourage my suppliers to make better decisions, and how do I raise my entire supply chain up through my procurement processes and my relationships with my suppliers. With the coronavirus, it's really just brought to light, I think, a lot of the gaps in resiliency, but also the positive aspects of resiliency that companies have put into place, like where they've got some gaps that need to be filled, solutions that need to be designed, and then also for some companies, unfortunately, where they really weren't resilient to a major disruption like this. And there's always the extremes, which is you can survive and thrive and learn and prosper in the future, from an event like this, or on the worst case scenario is you go out of business. And because this is an unprecedented event, most companies plan for a single supply chain disruption. So a tornado, a hurricane, a flood in one place at one time, and it's a short-lived type of situation, and they can move forward. This is a global disruption and potentially for a long period of time. And that is just not something that I think any company has planned for. And so, so those that do have those strategies already in place are thinking more strategically, more in that resilient long-term framework. I think those are going to be the ones you see, coming out the other side of this, and those are oftentimes the ones that also have really solid sustainability planning as well. Initiatives that are suffering right now. And so the focus with COVID-19 coming on the scene, the focus has all of a sudden, and rightfully so, shifted to human health. So there was a big push, lots of campaigns to get rid of this single-use everything, single-use coffee cups, single-use plastics. And all of that has kind of gone by the wayside and right now for the purposes of human health. And so coffee shops, you can still go to your coffee shop and socially distance and get your coffee, but you're going to get it in a paper cup. And the single-use plastics initiatives, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think people are right now worried about human hands touching their food, touching their products, and so they want their food protected. Food waste is another one that's suffering right now. So there's so many food waste initiatives, across supply chains and community initiatives, corporate initiatives, and we're just seeing a huge disruption in the food supply chain right now. And so we're seeing in the news, a lot of whole fields of vegetables being plowed under. And to know that food's being wasted, this is again an unprecedented event, but something that couldn't have been planned for. But I know that those food banks and those food waste programs are scrambling to try to get food to people that need it. And at the same time, we have more people that need food now because unemployment is so high. And so we have this kind of strange dilemma with food right now. And those food waste initiatives are certainly feeling the brunt of that. And then more broadly, there's just at the government level, different governments seeing COVID-19 as a reason to loosen environmental regulations to get business back up and running. So we're seeing that in China right now. They've suspended the enforcement of their environmental regulations so that their small and medium-sized companies can get back up and running. I suspect that we'll see that in the US as well. Brazil's not monitoring their forests, their Amazon forests right now, which means that illegal logging is probably going on as we speak, and indigenous people are under threat. So these are the more broad kind of government level types of impacts that we see with this type of global disruption from COVID-19. We're seeing this shift and focus toward vaccines and this push for vaccines, whereas we'd had a big, and still continue to have a big anti-vax movement, not just in the US, but globally, and seeing that there is demand for that science, seeing really the incredible momentum behind trying to find vaccine for this virus. The positive impacts on planning for human health and human health impacts. Oftentimes, at least in our work, both environmental and human impacts are so important. And we forget that those two things are connected. And so I feel like one positive outcome that will come out of all of this is that this connection between human health and nature and wildlife and the environment are all going to come to light. And those are complicated connections, but with this particular virus, those connections are very clear. One thing that I think is an outcome of really any type of disruption, but particularly this one, is that emphasis on sustainability is larger than ever now. And so I'm not anticipating companies cutting their funding and support for sustainability organizations, but all that to say, it's always a possibility. And so we are trying to plan for that. And so we've been reaching out to private foundations and trying to just prepare if we were to lose members, so that we could continue to operate at the scale that we're operating at now. But yeah, it continues to be an evolving space that we're keeping track of. But we're doing the best we can to make sure that the content that we provide to our members is just as good as it's the same as if we were in person. It's just that we're doing it remotely from our homes and just letting them know that we're continuing to work on all of these issues and with them, and are here for them and support them, and realize that even though, you know, our lives are disrupted, that sustainability is still moving forward and we are still moving forward. Whole systems are complicated, but in this particular case, the connections are clear. You know, and in many cases, the connections are clear if you kind of slow down and think about them. So, you know, we could use paper products for an example. Everybody panic bought their paper products, and now, you know, we're out. It's where are those trees going to be harvested? Where are they coming from? Do those places currently have relaxed environmental regulations? So just like with the virus and understanding where it came from and how it came to be, you know, supply chains are not that different, you know, in terms of understanding where did it come from, what are the impacts, what am I as a company or as a business doing, what am I as a consumer, what am I buying, what am I investing my dollars in, what impacts is that driving? You know, bringing the science and the communication of the science together so that people from a consumer to a corporation can understand what those whole system connections are is so important. So a lot of, you know, resiliency has to do with looking at the entire system and closing the loop. And so with many products, there are ways to eliminate waste, to take waste from one supply chain and use it as input for another supply chain, and getting creative about how do we connect the inputs and outputs of different industries, so that when you have these shocks to systems, I mean, I think COVID-19 is kind of unprecedented, but you know, just planning for even the things that we know are going to happen regularly, like hurricanes and typhoons and tornadoes and fires, you know, having supply chains that are focused on circular economy, are focused on green, what I call green supply chains, you know, with renewable materials, materials that are innovative and have less impact. All of those areas where scientists are focused right now and developing some of those innovations and figure out creative new solutions. I think we're at a point now where we have to do that. So hopefully some of the economic incentives and some of the financial help that we'll be seeing out of governments to help with the economic injury that was caused from COVID-19 will be dedicated towards some of those solutions, those creative solutions for circular economy and greener supply chains. I hope one of the outcomes will be that we really need less, and the things that are valuable. I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons is going to be that the things that are valuable are time with our families and our health and taking long walks and enjoying nature. I hope that some of those things stick, that people don't just rush back to their busy lives and driving around and flying around and missing what's really important.